Well, I hope that you have had really good VE Day celebrations today. I'm recording this just at about 6:15 on VE Day 75th anniversary. And it's been different, not quite the way most people intended, but there's been a lot going on. I was out riding my bike earlier on today, my exercise, and I went past a number of street parties, all carefully organised to maintain social distancing, you understand. But street parties, nonetheless. People were making the most of the situation. 75 years is a long time, isn't it? And to be celebrating something that happened 75 years ago means that there are very, very few people around today who remembered it. We had amazing sights of people in Trafalgar Square. There's a picture there, Trafalgar Square, celebrating the end of hostilities. It's so long ago that there aren't that many people around now who have first-hand experience. My father was a boy of 10 on VE Day, and my mother was only 4, so it's unlikely that she remembers very much. They both grew up in the city of Liverpool, which is a great city, and it's the city that was most bombed outside of London in the UK. So they both had experience of the war and what was going on in the war. I'm sure for them, VE Day was a great celebration. But as we think about VE Day, we remember that the first half of the 20th century was a pretty awful time to be alive. Between 1914 and 1945. 2 devastating world wars, the likes of which had never been seen before. Now, there have been no lack of conflicts since, but there has never been anything quite like the 2 world wars. So why do we want to remember them? Why should we remember them? Well, the first thing, of course, you all know, we want to remember them so that we don't repeat them. It's become a truism that those who don't learn the lessons of history are destined to repeat them. I'm not quite convinced by that. I think those who don't learn the lessons from history are convinced to make them worse. The history of the world and humanity has been of things getting worse, not better, and not just being repetitive. The 2 world wars were absolutely horrific, and long may we remember the horror and the evils and the wickedness of war. But also in 1918 there was something that swept the land that was even more devastating than the First World War, and that was the Spanish flu. That's a morgue in 1918 where people who had died were kept, of course. Now, some people have compared the COVID-19 pandemic that we're facing now to the Spanish flu of 1918. I want to tell you, what we're facing now is nothing compared to the Spanish flu of 1918. That was the worst pandemic in world history. In the UK, 250,000 people died. That's 10 times the number of those who have died from COVID-19. And that with a smaller population. Over 50 million, yes, 50 million people worldwide died of Spanish flu. That was similar to the population of the entire UK at the time. It was, as I've said, the most devastating pandemic ever. What amazes me, as somebody who enjoys science and has studied a bit of virology and microbiology, what amazes me is that such devastation can be caused by something so tiny. You know, viruses are so tiny that you can't see them without an electron microscope. They're so small that they weren't discovered until quite recently, because we just couldn't see them. Somebody has made a helpful analogy. If you imagine a children's balloon and think about the relationship of the size of that balloon to the size of the Earth, and then scale it the other way, the size of a virus is in the same proportion. Do you see that? So the virus is so tiny, it's like a balloon in comparison with the size of the Earth. It's so tiny. How can we be so impotent to do anything about it? In fact, how can we be so impotent to do anything about any viral infections? Well, this is VE Day. Celebrations celebrating 75 years, and I don't want to make you miserable. We should rejoice. I hope you're having a great celebration, remembering those who've fallen in war, but also giving thanks that we haven't had a world war like those two in the first half of the 20th century. At the same time, remember that all wars across the world are humanity's doing. Those two world wars were humanity's doing. Now, we'll leave the historians to argue and wrangle about what the causes, the actual causes were in both cases. But whatever the situation, it's very clear that they were humanity's doing. But also remember the devastation caused by the flu pandemic. And think about what we're facing now. A pale, small reflection of the flu pandemic, but serious nonetheless. And remember that the world's best in 1918 were powerless to do anything. It's just the same today. The world's best scientists are powerless to do anything. All we can do is try to stop the spread using computer modeling and statistical analysis. We can't actually do anything about it. You know, that reminds me that this world needs some sorting out. If humanity can cause devastating wars with one another, and there are things like viruses that we're just impotent to do anything about, we need something in this world, or someone, don't we? What do we need? Someone to save humanity from ourselves, because we cannot do it ourselves. In the book of Romans, in chapter 5, the Apostle Paul writes these words: "For while we were still weak, at the right time, Christ died for the ungodly. For one will scarcely die for a righteous person, though perhaps for a good person one would dare even to die. But God shows his love for us in that, while we were sinners, Christ died for us." It's an amazing thing, you know, the world, we're not so advanced and so brilliant as we like to think we are. And yet God loves us, loves his world so much that he sent his son to die for the world. If you want to know more about what that means, well, join us on Sunday morning for our morning service, available from 9 a.m. on Sunday morning, and enjoy that service together and listen to what we'll be talking about in Romans chapter 8. Now, may God continue to bless you this VE Day. I hope you're still celebrating, and long may you do so. I'll see you soon.